I have to say how excited I am to be in Iowa, right? Iowa. It is an amazing place, and one of the reasons why I like it so much here is because you all have RAGBRAI. How many of you know RAGBRAI? Yeah, So RAGBRAI, for those of you who don't know, is the Registers, the Des Moines Registers, annual great bike ride across Iowa. You dip your back wheel in the Missouri and your front wheel in Mississippi. How many of you have done RAGBRAI? Yeah, How many are doing it this year? Yeah, okay. Well, so I'll see you out there. I'm really excited to do it. So again, my name is Lynn Richards. I'm the president and CEO of the Congress for the New Urbanism, and we'll be talking a little bit about that today. But mostly, I'm really grateful to be here, to be helping Blue Zones implement their core mission, which is helping people live longer, healthier, and happier lives. And that's a lot of what CNU does. This is, hold on, let me get grounded here. Right, this is on the screen is Atlantic Station. It used to be a former brownfield site. I spent 15 years at the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, so you'll hear a few federal terms. But a brownfield site is a contaminated property. So think about it. We are able to transform a contaminated property to a place that now has over 4,000 residences, employs 18,000 people. And here's the kicker. It changed people from driving 34 miles a day to driving 12 miles a day. What CNU does is that we build places that people love, places where people and businesses can thrive and prosper, right? And we do that by transforming places that require the car, which make people fat. And we've all seen the statistics, so I'm not going to talk to you about the statistics, where you only need sneakers to get around. Right? Isn't that what we're trying to get to? That's what Blue Zones, at the very core basic, I want to make sure that we're all right there, that what you all are doing at Blue Zones, boots on the ground, is to help people live happier, healthier lives. And what CNU does is it transforms the built environment to achieve that exact same goal. And that's where we are. So what CNU does is that we revitalize corridors. We work in neighborhoods in small towns across the spatial aspects of community. We build green, affordable, transit-focused development, and we preserve historic buildings. This is CNU. And I wanted to ground you a little bit on what we do moving forward so you have a context. So the first thing that I want us to talk about is money, economics. How many of you in the audience work directly with either local elected officials, local staff, or state officials? All the time. That's what we're doing, right? If you all are trying to transform what's going on the ground, you need to talk a little bit about economics. I guarantee you, right? So let's talk. This is Lancaster, California. It's a town of about 100,000, 80 miles northeast of Los Angeles. Right? This is a 5-lane arterial. People went by at 60 miles an hour. How many people are walking here? How many people are getting killed by the cars? Yeah. So Blue Zones, happier, longer, healthier lives. How many people are happy, healthy, living long here? Not so many. So the city invested $11 million in streetscape improvements across the 8 corridors, and that attracted over $300 million in private investment. Think about that. So they got a federal grant. Yes, this isn't going to work across all towns, but you're able to transform the environment to create a place that not only encourages but celebrates walking, celebrates the pedestrian, celebrates the social gathering. Oh, and by the way, the town, attracts $300 million in private investment. Like, who's going to say no to that? Just who's going to say no to that? Chris Lineberger, who's a Brookings Fellow at Smart Growth America, is doing a huge amount of research now on walkable urban places. And what he's finding is that there's almost a 12, he says, I've got 12% here. He says in some places it's almost a 75% revenue bump, a price premium that people are willing to pay to live in these walkable urban places. All right, there's an affordable housing component to that. We'll just put that in the bike rack for right now and come back to it. But it's just really incredible. This is one of my favorite examples. It's a dead mall. Does anyone know how many malls were built last year? You guys are so smart. Yeah, no malls were built. It's a dead real estate product. So what that means, again, you guys are the boots on the ground, right? You guys are the boots on the ground, and you're working with local officials, and they're trying to say, well, I don't know how to become a more healthier, walkable place, right? And you're like, what about that dead mall? Let's start thinking about revitalizing that dead mall like Meisner Park. It transformed a dead mall. I think they added about 400 residences, about 50,000 square feet of retail. But what's more important, what Meisner Park did, is it served as the catalyst for the economic revival of downtown Boca Raton. Meisner Park, by the way, was just a half a mile from the beach. And it began this entire connection from the downtown to Meisner Park to the beach. It became a triad, and that whole area just blossomed into, wait for it, boots on the ground. The sneakers on the ground, where the cars stay parked and the bikes and the sneakers come out. That's the goal we're all looking for. That's the goal you all are looking for, and that's the goal that we're looking for. City Center in downtown Washington, the reason why I put this out is because we collectively are looking to create community. And the picture here is that Central Plaza. And I was having dinner with a board member, and I said, come on, let's go check out the new City Center. I hadn't seen it, right? And we walked in underneath the awning, and the whole development hadn't opened yet, and it literally took his breath away. He walked in, and he went, because we want to design places that inspire. We want to design places that can begin to heal. How many of you have seen the new People for Bikes video, Shed the Monster? I know, it's really phenomenal, but all of us are working to create and find spots where we can begin to kind of step back from our day, to shed the monster. And plazas like this, these social gathering areas, are so critical. Oh, yeah, and by the way, we're talking about investing in place. It has transformed a 10-acre parking lot into 2.5 million feet of vibrant retail. It just opened up, so I don't have the economic numbers on that as well. How many folks know WalkScore? All right, this is a tool you need to have in your back pocket. Some folks will say, yeah, it's not exact, and they get all cranky about it. But let's focus on the positive, right? It's a really great back-of-the-envelope calculation to assess how walkable a place is. And what research has found is that for every additional point, you're going to see a bump anywhere from $700 to $3,000 in walkability. So think about that. You're meeting with the economic development staff of a particular town, talking about what the Blue Zone's mission, and you're going to say, this is what we're doing for Blue Zones, but guess what? This is going to help your bottom line too. You're going to increase the property values. I mean, that's really quite incredible. I'm not going to read you all the statistics. And not only is it more walkable, but you're also going to see bumps in property values in creating open space, in creating those social gathering areas, in creating opportunities where we as a group can come together as community. Right? Because isn't that what we're all trying to do? If we all stay in our big suburban houses and never talk to one another, how are we going to achieve Blue Zone's core mission of creating, of helping people to live longer, healthier, happier lives? How are we going to create CNU's core mission of building places people love? Creating those spaces where people can interact, support, learn, meet one another is absolutely essential. Oh, and guess what? Here's the best news of all. This is where people want to live. Right? And that's, again, what you need to come back to. And so here's a statistic I just want you to keep in your back pocket, all right? So over the last 20 years, there have been about 36 surveys. I just have a couple up here, 36 surveys. And across the board, these surveys demonstrate consistently over the last 20 years, whether you're blue, you're red, you're purple, you're pink, whatever, they demonstrate that anywhere between 40 and 60% of the population wants to live in a walkable urban place. So let's just say 50%. Let's just say, kicks and giggles, 50% of the population wants to live in these types of neighborhoods. The market is responding with about 5%. In Dallas, I was just in Dallas. Scott, I was just there last week, flew home on Sunday. In Dallas, the statistic there is 68% of Dallas residents in the Metroplex want a walkable urban place to live, yet the market is only responding with 4%. Keep that in your back pocket when you're meeting with the economic development people. They're like, it's not going to work here. It's like, it is going to work here. But what this means is that 50% of the population wants to live in a low-density suburban context. And that's okay. We meet people where they are. Like, I live in a single-family detached home right now. I have a son, right? I'm a single parent. He was 1 when I became a single parent. He's now 12. He just needs space, all sorts of, and I hear the urban issue, but people, you have to meet people where we are. You never come out and say, sprawl's awful. You say, hey, 50% of the population wants to live in a walkable urban place. The market is responding with 5%. That is a 45% gap, and that's where we all need to exist. Right there. That's huge. So let's talk a little bit about implementation. The thing that I love about CNU, and I'm the new president. I just came in on July 1st. I had been with the US EPA and their Smart Growth program for the last 15 years, so I was a policy wonk. But what I love about CNU is that we are able to implement policy through design. And I just want to go one small example here on affordable housing. Because if we are going to create vibrant communities, we need to create communities where everybody at all ends of the socioeconomic demographic can thrive and prosper. So what we have in the United States now is we have market rate housing and we have affordable housing, which is subsidized, either at 60 or 80% of AMI, average median income, right? And that creates a gap, an attainable housing gap. And I like to think about the gap as my son's second grade teacher, Blair Langford, came from Texas, moved up to Arlington. She looked like Katie Holmes. All the dads loved going to parent-teacher conferences. Yeah. Miss Langford moved back to Texas because she couldn't find affordable housing. So when I talk about this, I try to tell the story about Miss Langford. You know, she's a young teacher. She's the teacher that, Scott, you were talking about. Man, my son thrived in her class. And, you know, he's this kid who can never sit still, right? He's a boy. So what we can do is actually, through design solutions, begin to create a smaller gap. And what are some of these design solutions, right? They're smaller properties, right? There are a range of different housing choices that aren't available anymore. And what we're finding is that Chris Nelson from the University of Utah estimates that there's about a 35 million unit shortage of these smaller units, micro units, accessory dwelling units, 1-bedroom studios, the type of place where, you know, kids returning from school might move into. How many of you have kids that are out of college? Raise your hand. How many of you have kids out of college? Leave your hands up. So everybody who has kids out of college. Okay. Now leave your hand up if at some point when they got done with college, they came back to live with you. Yeah. Oh, no, really? All right. Well, so that fell flat. But what we're finding is that there's a huge demographic shift. You know, we all heard that the baby boomers, I'm a Gen Xer, and the entire time that I was growing up, it was the baby boomers are the dominant demographic shift. But what we're finding is the millennials have exceeded the size of the baby boomers. It turns out that both the millennials and the baby boomers are actually looking for this type of smaller housing in a more walkable urban place. They're the folks that are really driving that 50% demand. So again, you guys are boots on the ground. You're working to implement Blue Zone's vision. I keep on pivoting back to that. And so when you're getting pushback on how to create a walkable street, how to begin to advocating for a range of different units, you all need to articulate that, hey, we need to create a place for our seniors to go live in a vibrant place where they don't need to go to an assisted living because the community becomes the eyes on the street. We need to create a neighborhood where our college graduates can come back to. We need to create a neighborhood where Blair Langford, I just lost my momentum, where Blair Langford feels accepted and she can stay and to grow roots. And that's what the missing middle is, and that's a lot of what CNU does, is it looks for design solutions. So I'm not going to get a lot into the missing middle, but it's looking at small apartment units, duplexes, fourplexes, bungalow courts. Guess what? A lot of these are illegal to build right now. Now, I know a lot of you are working on codes and ordinance and on creating walkable streets, and I'm asking you to think about to throw housing into the mix too, because we cannot have a successful Blue Zones community without a range of people in it. We've got to have the young folks. We've got to have the old folks. We've got to have the rich folks, the poor folks, and everybody in the middle. Working together across the range of socioeconomic demographics is what's going to create a successful healthy, happy, long-living community, right? And additionally, again, I'm coming from the EPA, think about incorporating green into it. What happens if you begin to think about incorporating green structure? So I just heard, again, we just had our Congress, and I just heard from Ed Mazzaria. He's the president of Architecture 2030, and what he said is that 2015, for the first time in history, that solar panels, energy generated from solar panels, is now cheaper than fossil fuels. I know, I want to get his slide. I would have shown that up there. I'm still tracking that down. But that we are seeing an absolute complete revolution in this. So now, if it's cheaper, and we're talking about affordable housing, we want to create a goal where we're creating an inclusive neighborhood, all of a sudden we're creating housing where the utility bills are really kind of low, and that makes it more affordable. It's safer on the environment, but it makes it more affordable. We're meeting multiple community outcomes. What I love so much about Blue Zones and the work that you do is that you don't have a singular message. Your message is as multidisciplinary and as multifunctional as CNU's message. So think creatively about adding green. What I love here is that Sean Donovan, he's no longer the HUD secretary, incorporated green building techniques as a requirement into grant proposals for HUD funding. That's that quote there. But think about it. This is so important that the secretary is now incorporating it into grant proposals. Not only that, we've been able to transform Paso Verde. It's a 2-acre brownfield site and that includes affordable housing, green housing, sustainable, and it's a half a block away from the metro station. It becomes a very walkable, livable place. And not only do we want to incorporate green into the housing, let's begin to incorporate green into our communities. This is Emeryville, California, 1.2 square miles. It's smushed between Oakland and Berkeley. It revitalized a 4-block stretch of railroad track. It was also a brownfield to create that social gathering area, thinking about activating the public realm. Thornton Place, Washington, a parking lot. There's surface parking lots everywhere. When you guys see a surface parking lot, you need to think, how can I activate this in some way, because doing so will help meet my core goals, right? And it becomes not only economically thriving for the community, it also begins to provide that green, that very important respite that we need. And think about it, green adds texture. How can we just think about the corners of our street, the corners of our building? I don't mean literally the corners, but the range of nuances. Think about the space between the buildings. It's just not space, it's just not a building and it's street. It's the space between the buildings. How can we activate the space between the buildings to create a space where we want to be? I loved our speaker talking about how we can design our kitchens and our food where we just mindfully eat less. How can we design our built environment where we just mindfully move more? And that's really what we're trying to get to here, right? So I want to talk a little bit about the regulations and the coding, because I know that's what you all work on a lot. So do your regulations allow this by right? The codes and ordinances of every community is the DNA. What is in there begins to really define and drive the type of development that's available, that ensues. You want to make it legal. You absolutely want to encourage and enable a legal framework to get the development that you want. But here's the key thing here. There's 75,000 units of local government, and there's maybe 20 different coding choices. You absolutely need to meet the local governments where they are. I was just speaking with the director of Nashville, Tennessee, and he said the first thing he did as planning director was to move the parking in the back and to change a setback to a Bill 2. That's the only thing he did. Boom, that was it. And this residents got used to it. The developers got used to it. They're like, hey, we want more of that. And he was then able to implement 22 form-based codes, which generated over $1 trillion of new construction. It took 20 years, but you meet local governments where they are. One small change, and then you can build on the successes of that. Changing the codes in Greensboro, North Carolina. I love talking about Greensboro because it's not, it's a small town It passed a traditional neighborhood design, transformed a 10-acre piece of property that was a 5-minute walk from the central business district, and tax values went from $400,000 to over $10 million in a few years. Also as a design piece, and I know that you've heard from Dan Burden a number of times, so I wanted to go light on the streets, but to think about how you can create an environment that not only encourages, but celebrates the pedestrian. There are over 600 complete street policies that are on the books, either at the state or the local level. How many of you actually have complete streets ordinances or codes at the state or local level that you're aware of? Yeah, and how many of you have seen great streets come out of that? Yeah, that's a real problem. And a lot of folks say, we've got a complete street code, we're all good to go, but that's actually not where we are on this. We need to think about how to create a complete and beautiful street. Right, so think about that. I have seen so many sidewalks that go right up to the curb and there's no pedestrian bit. Think about, check in with yourselves when you're walking down here. Why do I like walking down this street and not that street? Why is this block interesting and not that block? Trust yourselves. You all are the experts when you're walking around. And the other bit that I want to talk about is how important this is in kickstarting private investment. I'm sure many of you are working in areas and in communities that have not necessarily a hot real estate market like DC or Washington. So when you start thinking about transforming a street, be it only a block, when you are working with your local government and encouraging them to invest in street furniture, to invest in stormwater management at the street level, to invest in changing the codes, when you're encouraging them to just do a little bit of investment in an area, that can kickstart a whole wide range of private investment. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about governance. What we're doing here is hard. We need to stop and acknowledge that. It's hard, right? It requires a very sophisticated governance system to make it all work, and sometimes it doesn't. So there's two pieces of information that I have learned the hard way that I want to impart with all of you. The first is the inside-outside game. So I told you I worked with EPA for 15 years, and I used my outside colleagues like you just wouldn't believe. When I was trying to move a particular policy change through at the federal level, I would call on my outside folks and ask them to make strategic calls, and it would blow through. You guys are on the outside. Cultivate folks on the inside so you can more effectively play that inside-outside game. It's incredibly important. And then the final is the 100-day agenda. And I'm going to end on this because it's something that Dan and I have both talked about. You're going to a place, you're bringing in an expert. You are creating that inspiration, that momentum. Everybody in that community where you just finished a walking audit or a code audit is now inspired to move forward, to go do something, right? You're there. You've got them exactly where you want that community, and you can't let it stop. So in your prep work, you talk with the local government, and you're like, what are you planning 3 months after what are you planning? Like, you know, we're going to fix this so it's all successful. What are you planning to do? And well, we're going to paint this sidewalk. Great. So during your workshop, you say, how about we paint this sidewalk? Never mind that it was already in there. You hold the local government accountable in a 100-day agenda, and you are able to demonstrate results in 100 days, and you announce it as a 100-day agenda. And you frame it as that. The trick is seeding it to make sure that there's actual things that they can deliver on. And I have found this to be unbelievably successful because local governments are always doing something. What can they have already planned to do that you incorporated it into your workshop, you hold it up to say, we're going to do this, and then it becomes a part of it. Or if they were going to do something over on another street, move it into that area of focus. Those are easy things to do. So I have totally gone over my time. Everybody's telling me to wrap up. So again, I just want to thank you all for your patience and for inviting me here.